Uninhibited, uncompromising, that rushes through your head like a freight train. Hang on for the ride. America's first competition talk show. You're in the hub.
Okay, so we just can't get away from the Arizona law and what the debate over this right now. The State Department has now come out with a new one. They are now submitting the Arizona law on illegal immigration, or immigration reform, as a case study, I guess, to the United Nations. Governor Jan Brewer in Arizona is very upset about this, as one might imagine. There's no reason to bring this up in the UN unless we're making a whole argument about international law, the international court, submitting what we do in this country to the tribunal of the greater society of man, which, Tom, I mean, to me, I'm sitting between two lawyers, so I'm going to throw it off, but I'm going to throw off my responsibility I had about this. But the thing about this, I mean, we go back to, I mean, we cite everything in international law in the last 100 years and the precedents that have been set around the world, all the way back to, talking about religious fundamental separation of church and state. To me, it should be separation of mosque and state, or not mosque, but synagogue and state, if you really want to be specific. Well, Ten Commandments. So
our country has never really, we've always been independent from international law, and we really shouldn't be looking at what goes on in international law to determine what happens here. The Constitution of the United States is the highest law of the land. It dictates what we do. The only thing that we incorporate from common law, that England's law that's brought over when we were colonies, is that which was allowed by the Constitution. If it wasn't at common law at the time the Constitution was created, it wasn't incorporated. That's why when you have new laws like Title VII, which is discrimination against race, religion, sex, or ethnicity, that originally you didn't have jury trials. Well, there's no right to a jury trial because it was not a right you had at common law. Workers' compensation in different states, again, no right to a jury trial because it was not in effect at the time that the Constitution was approved. So I don't think that well, we have to do it because it's international law. You don't. We are the Constitution.
Paul, the State Department is saying that the reason they're doing this is because they're trying to uphold human rights of citizens. In doing this and putting this up as a case study. In that, how are you doing that in a border state with a higher than average level of violent crime due to illegal smuggling and that type?
Well, I don't know what the remedy is. Is the UN going to come in and have observers? Are we going to have UN police coming into Arizona to protect Mexican immigrants coming across the border? Maybe the UN can set up refugee camps in the Arizona desert to
They already do. It's in New York.
Harbor these folks, and when they come across the border, I'm not really sure. I mean, first of all, there really is no such thing as international law. There's law of the various different nations, and I know some Supreme Court justices and other people have gotten in trouble for saying that they would look to the law of other nations to solve novel legal issues here in the United States, and you can debate that. But whether or not there are international conventions. You have the Geneva Convention, and there's some loosey-goosey stuff that countries abide by. But the main fact is that the UN is a joke, and the fact that they're recommending that the UN look at Arizona, our own State Department is recommending that a panel that's comprised of countries like Libya, North Korea,
reputable countries of choice here.
Those people are going to be sitting in judgment of the great state of Arizona.
Lee, you can take the rest of it later in the show.
Yeah, seriously, I'm ready.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, whether you agree or disagree with the immigration law in Arizona, which a lot of folks have gone either way on it. Should we be able to? Is it profiling to pull somebody's ass for their status once we pulled them over for criminal act? Well, I mean, I guess that's an abridgment of their right to lawlessness, the lawfulness of their lawlessness. But aside from that, I mean, the whole argument to begin with. It's none of their business.
It's so, well, first of all, no, it's not their business. But the argument being the implicit argument or explicit argument being offered by the writers of this report is so insane and devoid of intelligence. It's mind-boggling. They say, well, we're gonna call our own hand on
one of our states
on not the law but the fact that one of the states wants to enforce it. So they're saying, well, something could happen. Someone's civil rights could be violated as Arizona enforces federal law. But they're not saying there's something wrong with this federal law. They are hung up. The sole basis for their worry that there might be human rights violations is predicated not on the law that's being enforced, but who's going to do it. So some guy in Cameroon is going to be infatuated with the nuance of whether it's a county marshal, an FBI agent,
you're making an excellent point.
or the chief of police in Phoenix. That's going to that distinction is both. It avoids the main issue, which is the content of the law, and it assumes a preoccupation that is not going to exist with the delegation from Angola. Yeah. So the essence of the human rights violation is going to be locked up in just the infinitesimal nuance of whether the marshal or the sheriff enforces this law that we are discussing is in violation. No change in the law. Just the again minutia of who enforces it.
Well,
therein lies the civil rights violation.
They reneged on their responsibilities. The whole reason we have this issue to begin with, because I mean, I may not be doing a damn thing but sitting on my lazy arse, but that doesn't mean you can. That's almost like the jaded. That's almost like the jaded ex who breaks up with the girl but doesn't like the new boyfriend because I mean, you may not like fat bottom girls anymore, but it doesn't mean they don't still make the rock and roll go.
Where's the appendix to this report that says the ramifications of the federal government imposing the same law? It won't be there.
Yeah, I want to go back to some of the Paul said about what is international law. I think the concept of international law really starts towards the end of World War II when we had defeated Nazi Germany and we were trying to have the war crimes trials, and all of a sudden, because you could have done it two ways. You could have gone and just shot every German general and every German official, or you could have had something very orderly that looked nice, that looked legal, and we were trying to have something that looked legal to do what we wanted to do, to get rid of all the Nazis. And I'm not saying we should have gotten rid of all the Nazis, I'm sure we absolutely should have, but the idea of that there was some international law that's unwritten, that laws against humanity, that's where you get the concept of international law, and that's how we get to this. And the whole UN, the problem with the UN is that it was a very foggy idea that FDR threw out. He talked about the United Nations, the nations that came together to fight the Nazis, but he didn't really say, did he intend for it to be like a League of Nations or whatever, and in memory of him.
Well, he might have done that on purpose because the last one didn't work out.
Well, I think, I don't know if he had in mind to do something like the United Nations or if he just talked about it in general terms, and that in respect to his memory, the people who were surviving afterwards said, well, we got to do this United Nations thing. We don't know what FDR wanted, but we're going to try and do it anyways.
Well, yeah, to Lee's point, I mean, it's ridiculous that we're referring the issue of federalism and whether it violates people's civil rights to the UN. That's pretty interesting.
Well, and quite frankly, let's be honest. Tom's absolutely right. The world, the global law, the international law that we evoked at the end of World War II gave a kind of panel appearance, a legitimacy to the adjudication of war crimes. The problem, quite frankly, comes from the fact that once you set that up, other people expect to come to that party. People who don't have the history and tradition of civilization that your country does. And that sounds condescending, but literally you look at the people who want to come to the table and be treated as equal partners on a human rights commission, and it's a rogues gallery.
It doesn't.
And the problem is that if you keep that body intact, then you have to let everyone who was sitting at the children's table sit at the big people's table, and eventually it falls apart because China, Cameroon, and Angola want an equal voice.
Yeah, I always liked the children's table because it was closer to the radio. We love listening to Paul Harvey. We'll see you tomorrow on The Hub.